So many people are afraid to pick up the phone now, to call 100 times a day, but that's what it takes. You have to fall on your face a few times to feel confident in your pitch, in your delivery, in that discovery, in positioning the next step. And it all comes back to the practice, and good enablement helps to create that environment where practice is part of the culture, and practice is the reinforcement for all learning.
Welcome back to the Thoughts on Selling podcast. Today, it is my absolute pleasure to have a recent friend, Jackie Retig, join me on the podcast to talk about all things sales enablement. Jackie, welcome aboard. Are you ready for the first question?
I am. Shoot me with it. First podcast, first question. We're here for it.
That's it. You're a podcast newbie, so hopefully you'll be doing this again and again because it's so much fun. So here's the first question. Who is Jackie?
Great question. So my recent answer is that I'm a new business owner. So for the last 8 years, I've actually been working in tech and enablement. And I'm in this exciting new chapter right now where my former boss and I, Matt Hay, started our own enablement as a service consulting business in the last 6 months. So I would say that's become a big part of my identity. It's an exciting move that I never really thought I would make. I never thought I'd be my own boss. But outside of work, outside of the day-to-day, I'm also a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a big part of my community on the Upper West Side of New York City. I'm a dog owner.
No, dog mom.
Sorry, dog mom. I should know this by now. It's only been 8 years. So that's just a little bit about me these days.
I got a call from the vet years ago on a Saturday morning with some results for Max. The vet tech called up, or maybe it was a clerical person, and he said, "Can I talk to Max's owner?" And without even thinking about it, I said, "Well, I'm his dad." And there's this silence on the other end of the phone for just a second, and then it's like, his tests were fine. It's like, okay, great, thanks. I'll let him know.
I love it. I mean, my dog does have my last names. I'm the only one on her adoption papers. I'm like a very proud dog mom, but my husband always jokes that he wants to be added to her adoption papers. I'm like, we'll see.
And your dog has an Israeli passport, right?
Technically, no passport, but she does have, the Israeli origins. She was born there, adopted her when I was living in Tel Aviv, also about 8 years ago, and moved her stateside in 2020. So now she's a New York City dog through and through.
So Jackie, here's question number 2. How do you define sales enablement?
Great question. I think actually enablement, since it's fairly recent term, I know this is controversial, you might see it differently, but let's say in the last 10 years, enablement has really come into existence. The way I see it is it's anything that goes to the consistency, repeatability, and predictability of a sales team, especially. And sometimes enablement it supports more than just the sales team. But for me, it's really those 3 principles. But I see a lot of times that people are focused on enablement as like, it's the training or it's the learning. They really want to narrow it down to one thing, but it is so many things that help impact, especially a sales team.
You and I have a very similar perspective: consistency, repeatability, and predictability. A lot of people do think of enablement as training or as onboarding. And yes, enablement people can do those things. However, if we get pigeonholed into those categories, we are missing the opportunity to improve results, because training doesn't guarantee improved results. Training guarantees time out of seat, right?
Definitely. I was talking to a company just last week that's really onboarding focused when it comes to enablement. Mm-hmm. And exclusively, they help sellers close their first deal within their first 6 months. And I asked them, what happens after the 6 months? They're like, after that, they're self-sufficient. I'm like, is anyone self-sufficient in a job after 6 months? Right. Especially a job as hard and as fast changing as working in sales within tech, right? It's all about that ongoing journey and that ongoing skill set and coaching. So many of the things we've talked about when it comes to building that muscle and continuing to grow it.
So I'll ask you a related question, and I'm going to make an assumption here. Why are you so passionate about enablement?
A great question. It really, I think, for me, comes down to helping people and wanting to enable people really to succeed at their life goals. And when I think back to I could go into teaching, I could go into so many different areas that could also help people. I think it's like within tech sales, especially, there's so many things to learn. It's a challenging field, so many industries, and there's so many skills you have to master. So you yourself are also always learning and being challenged in the process. So it's that dual side of I get a lot out of it from growing and having that growth mindset myself, but helping others to grow and achieve and succeed is also very fulfilling.
I can relate. I have a passion for helping people transform, and enablement is helping people to think differently, perform differently. And for me, that's part of transformation. And I love working with class of people. In May, they're at senior week. In June, they're wearing red company t-shirts, wandering around campus going, what do we do now? Right. And so for them, I have the conversation of, you are a sales professional, which means you have to practice your craft, right? There's no professional ball player that steps up to the plate and, hits a home run without practicing thousands of swings. The other talk track that I love to have with them is, particularly for BDRs and SDRs, you may be the first touch ever of the company with this account. So you own the brand creation. You own the positioning creation. However you interact with that first contact is how that company is going to think of your company for a long time. And I don't hear that talk track very much with other enablement people or onboarding people. It's just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. You're going to make 50 calls. Here's 10 hours of information about your product. Good luck.
I love the combination too of it's about transformation and it's also about all the different roles along the journey, because so many of the times, right, we start out by enabling someone in that first sales job right out of college or wherever they are in their trajectory. And then we get to see them grow into the next role. We get to see them, even if it's a few companies later, kind of get to that place that they've always wanted to get to. And I find that very rewarding too, looking at their whole journey. And over time, it is a transformation from wherever they start to wherever they get to. And that part's really exciting too.
It is absolutely a journey and a transformation. I had the opportunity to work with some inside salespeople at Oracle, and a few of the folks were particularly motivated to be successful, and successful not so much in ringing the bell a lot, in developing their skill sets. And I remember one guy, Eric Elam, who would grab me after an enablement workshop and say, hey, can we spend 30 minutes just doing role playing? And we'd sit back to back in an empty conference room and he'd call me and we'd go through it. And I watched him and a couple of his peers move from inside sales to outside sales to sales management. And now those folks are all in sales leadership at various companies. I'm blessed to be part of their journeys.
100%. It's really those reps and managers who lean in, who want to do the role plays, who want to talk to you after a training and figure out what went well, what could be done better next time. Those are the ones that are not just bought in, but understand what's in it for them and how they can take what you're doing and help themselves to get to that next level. I think that's huge. And those are my favorite people to work with. And it's all about trying to convince everyone to have that mindset of leaning in, being present, figuring out how this is going to help you to get to where you want to go.
I'd like to ask you this question. In talking with prospective customers, people who want more out of enablement, what are some of the trends you're hearing? What's top of your prospects and customers' minds these days? What are they asking you for with regard to enablement?
Definitely. So most of the people I talk to are VP sales and CROs within fast-growing tech companies that either don't yet have enablement, they're about to make that investment, or they have a small enablement team today. And for almost all of them, they're seeing that some of their reps are very successful. Some know how to run deals from A to Z and are somewhat, let's say, self-sufficient. But for most of the team, especially their newer account executives, there's no consistency today. Things aren't repeatable. And then it's hard to make predictions, right? It's hard to forecast accurately. It's hard to get a majority of reps, even not just making quota, contributing to quota. And for all of these leaders, what I'm seeing as the big shift is that they understand that enablement can be a force multiplier for their teams. Like a few years ago, you really had to kind of convince sales leaders why enablement was important and why it should ideally fall under them or be part of their team or their direction. And now I think they are seeking out enablement, and they're seeking out strong enablement in order to help their teams get to the next level and to become more consistent in how they do everything, right? In their process, in their day-to-day operations, in how they run deals, and how they work with customers. I see that as like their main focus, and a huge opportunity for enablement professionals, for consultants, for a whole variety of resources to come in and help fill that gap.
Right. I'm hearing two key themes. One, predictability or repeatability. Many years ago, I heard this tagline: you cannot manage what you do not measure. There's a longer statement around that, but that's the essence of, if you're not counting stuff, you don't know whether a change will influence the results. And the second is that force multiplier, which I think is really important. There's a sales manager who might have 10 or 20 salespeople. He or she isn't coaching them all the time, not able to provide all the guidance they need. And enablement is that force multiplier to help ensure that more of the team have the skills and resources and capabilities and mindset necessary for success. However they measure success. If they measure success by number of meetings booked, if they measure success by ARR, if they measure success by customer sat or retention, that's up to the individual company, right?
100%. And I think for leaders in the past, there's that mindset like, let's just throw more reps at the problem. Let's just bring on more tools. But we all know more reps don't help if the reps don't have the resources they need, the training they need, the ongoing reinforcement and process and structure for them to understand how to best do their job. So it is a positive change that I'm seeing there when it comes to, everyone kind of being bought in and understanding enablement as a really important piece here.
It's a whole lot more cost effective and efficient to improve conversion rates by a small percentage point at each stage of the pipeline than to add reps or to increase marketing qualified leads, right? It's so much easier and better to improve the capability of the individual across the pipeline than to just shovel more money into the funnel.
Definitely. I think that's so true. And I think that too often, it's not like we're giving up on reps, but if they're not performing right away, if they don't get it right away, we're kind of classifying them like, okay, they're just not going to be an A player. And now we all understand that with the right coaching, with the right support, so many of those individuals really can be coached up to be an A player and have their managers be more focused on the strategic coaching, on the areas that they can empower them versus like running their deals and micromanaging them or joining all their calls. Like, we need leaders to be focused on the parts of their job that are most valuable and important, and not think they can, take on all of the training themselves. Like, up until now, for some of these companies that hadn't made the investment in enablement, leaders were just being told, like, you have to do it all. You have to hire, you have to train, you have to manage, you have to coach. And that's too much for one person, right? Leaders need to really focus on the things that are most valuable for them and bring in help where it's needed from others.
Let's go a bit deeper on the consistency or lack thereof. When we were talking earlier, you mentioned lots of tribal knowledge, but no institutional knowledge, no sharing of that tribal knowledge across salespeople or across teams or across regions. And that tribal knowledge of what works is so important. I was coaching a field rep who was fairly new to the role, and she was working on a fairly large deal with an account, and it was a first move for cloud services for this company. And I said, do you happen to have a cloud services addendum already signed? And she says, what's that? If I hadn't asked her early in the sales cycle, much, much later, that would have come up, and there would have been a lot of energy expended to try to get that done quickly. And CSAs aren't always done quickly. Because there's a whole different set of legal issues that come up in a CSA. That tribal knowledge of what do I need to do? What does a good pursuit look like? How do I manage those relationships? How do I improve my relationship bank account? It's what I see is, as companies become more savvy about how to run sales organizations formally, these issues come up and the tribal knowledge gets captured more formally.
Definitely. And it's such an interesting balance. I'm working with some companies still at the Series A phase, but quickly maturing and progressing. And I think some of them are allergic to the idea of becoming like too corporate or documenting everything. But on the flip side, you have reps that just don't know what to do in a discovery call. They don't know what deck to show. They don't know what's the right next step. They don't know what content to send after the meeting. So you always need this balance of give reps the tools they need to succeed without telling them like this is how it always needs to be done. And it's so important that those things are well documented, that they're clear, that people know where to go. Otherwise, reps are wasting so much of their time just looking for the right answer. They're burning out, they're frustrated, and then they leave, right? If they don't get the support they need, they're not going to be loyal to that company in a year or 2 years' time.
I think in the early stage companies, in many cases, the founder-led sales mentality is pervasive. And I personally had this experience when I was in strategic sales for a predictive analytics company. The CEO and co-founder said to me, I want you to sell this way. And I'd been selling for a long time already. I said, Michael, I sell using a whiteboard. And he said, no, I want you to use my 100-slide deck. And I said, but I'm not the founder. They don't want to hear the history of the company from me. They want to hear that from you. They don't want to hear it from me. And so I think we need to help those early stage companies realize that when you move from founder-led sales to product-led growth or sales-led growth, the rules change.
They really do. And doing it in a way that is scalable, where reps understand like what's that pitch, what's that message, to your point, that's effective, that the prospect or customer is open to hearing and is more focused on them as the customer than on us as the company. Like it's really hard, right, to have that mentality shift, but it's also so important.
Yeah, it's moving to the outside in view of what's the customer up to, as opposed to look at the cool shit we can build. You know, every founder believes their stuff is the best thing since sliced bread. That's why they're founders. That's why they go out on their own. That's why they choose to leave corporate America and build their own stuff. It's a religious commitment. My stuff is the best. And many expect their customers to grab a hold of that belief and run alongside. And most customers have business problems to solve. They don't want to be in the religious discussion. They've got OKRs to meet. They've got businesses to run. They want to know, how would this help me? What's in it for me?
Part of this too is like sales has just gotten harder in general, right? Companies have tighter budgets. There's more people that are part of any buying decision. And for reps, if you focus on yourself and your technology, like you are out so quickly. So you really need to find ways to early on differentiate yourself. And you do it, right, by focusing on the customer, focusing on their value, their business problems, and having a really deep understanding of what that company does and how you as a rep can help. That's a big focus for us in the things we train on and we implement, is shifting the mindset and every meeting focusing on what's the end in mind for my customer. What decision do they need to make? How can I enable that decision? And how can I guide them not to our products and our solutions? How can I guide them to making the decision that's most relevant and important for them? And it's hard, right? It's human nature to focus on yourself, to focus on what you need to accomplish, what you need to sell. And having that shift is where you see those reps that are the trusted advisor, that do have these great relationships with their customers. And it carries with them throughout their journey, throughout their career. Those are the best reps I've worked with. I'm sure you've seen a similar thing at Oracle and in other stuff, that those are the people that really go on to have really meaningful, I think, careers as well.
The move from product selling to services selling absolutely requires that. And you've made that shift, and I've made that shift. You know, when you're selling a product, at some level, you can point at the product and say, here are the features, here are the benefits of that product. Now, we don't talk about features and benefits anymore. I can actually point at the product, right? Here's the product, or, you know, here's the cloud in which our software runs. When you're selling services, or when I'm selling services, they don't exist until we're actually delivering them. I don't have anything to point to. You don't have anything to point to. So that's why I love services, selling services marketing, because it has to be all about the outcomes. It has to be all about the benefits. It has to be all about what the customer is up to and how we support them. Were you specifically conscious of that as you started your company, or was that just a natural shift for you?
I think both. Part of it is natural and part of it has to be very intentional and is still a struggle. And I would say the part that's the hardest with enablement in general, I think, is measuring effectiveness. There's so many things within sales we're measuring, but to say like, here was enablement's impact in improving that conversion rate or improving the quota attainment of the team. So many outside factors. So I think that's still an ongoing discussion challenge, but I do think really tying enablement to influencing those metrics is so important to justify our services, to justify the need for enablement, to get sales leaders and CROs bought in and understanding how we can really help get that team to the next level, how we can help the business to be more scalable and predictable, I think is so important. And for me, like, I'm not a numbers person, so it doesn't come naturally, but it is clear to me, like, that's the most important, is to tie yourself to that value and to be able to prove it out.
I've seen the same thing, that we don't want to run A/B tests. We don't want to say we're going to enable part of the population and not enable another part of the population, in part because that means if we are successful, the control group isn't going to make as much money. That's not fair. Right? So we have to be able to say, we did this work and this was the change. And Jackie, you're precisely correct that there are so many variables in the environment, whether it's just time of year or the economy or the level of expertise or the change of customers or marketing or whatever. It's so difficult to say, we did this and this was the outcome. We have to find that to continue the work, whether you're an internal group or whether you're a service provider.
100%. I remember at a prior company, Sisense, still exists, business intelligence company. And there I worked very closely with the sales engineering leadership. And one thing we realized with time was that our technical sales process and our business sales process weren't well aligned. So account executives go in, they're very focused on value selling and understanding the business outcomes and business pains. But then we get into a POC and it's all about features and functionality, and it's not tied back to the business benefits. So we introduced a change together. We decided for every POC, and we needed to collaborate with our prospect to build out those technical criteria, success criteria, and everything has to tie back to their business outcomes. And we need to get the sign off from the prospect before we start. This is what we're going to test because these are your requirements. This is how they tie back to the outcomes you want to achieve. And are we on the same page before we start this testing? And we saw with that change, which was a big shift for the team, both for the sellers and the sales engineers, saw a 50% increase in the POC or technical evaluation win rate. And that was really gratifying. That was over the course of a year, but it is so rare to be able to point and say, like, this was the change that was made and this is the outcome. But when you can do it, I think it's also very, like I mentioned, very satisfying. And it's good to know that there are these things from a process perspective that can have that impact.
The POC is a great example of that because too many organizations look at a POC as just part of the scattershot of let's get as many POCs as we can and some of them will close. Well, you're kind of guaranteeing that most of them aren't going to lead to anything because you don't have the commitment of the prospect. They aren't bringing the resources necessary to have a successful POC, and they don't have criteria. They don't have that success criteria. I saw that very early on in my career. We put a system in an environment. I was the sales engineer on the account. We put a system in an environment. And a few months later, I went back to check on the system. No one had ever logged into it. And it was just a total waste of resources and assets and time. Again, this was early in my career. The rep and I hadn't gone through, what are you going to do? What are you going to look at? Who's going to do it? Let's have weekly check-ins. And it was a total miss. And guess what? We didn't get the deal.
Definitely. I'm actually not seeing the opposite lately, but what I'm seeing is that companies point to a high POC, technical evaluation win rate. And their conclusion is we just need to get more companies into the POC phase because that's where we have the biggest success rate. And it's true. If you can convert through stage 3, wherever that technical process occurs in your sales process, you can get opportunities there that are qualified. Your chances of closing them are going to be higher because you've already done that qualification. You've already gotten them through a few steps where they had to make a commitment and they had to allocate some resources, sometimes some energy, and likely they were evaluating other competitors. And so they're kind of moving through your funnel. But it's not addressing the problem of why don't you have enough opportunities making it to that stage. And I think that top of the funnel piece those early conversations, those discovery meetings, I think that's where a lot of sales teams fall short. It's where there's a big drop off. It's where a lot of deals stall after that first or second meeting. And I also think right now that's where reps have the biggest opportunity to stand out, to come with a well-researched, like the company's pain points, I would say, and how their solution could help, but without focusing on the solution, really focusing on the pain, focusing on the business outcomes, and being that trusted advisor early on, earning that and kind of moving through that and eventually getting to the POC when the timing is right, when the resources are in place, when the alignment is there between the business outcomes and the technical requirements.
Jackie, what's your perspective on discovery? What's the purpose of discovery?
A great question. I think for me, discovery is all about that two-way value-based conversation that helps both sides to uncover needs, align on outcomes, and decide whether it makes sense to keep talking, right? It's not all about us as reps interrogating someone and getting out the right answers and saying like, yes, this is qualified, or no, this is not worth pursuing. Really much more about the customer and helping them to articulate their needs and helping them to uncover areas of opportunity. I think it all comes back to, right, being really two-way, but ideally customer focused from early conversations throughout the sales process. I don't know if you ever look at Gong calls or any other conversational intelligence tool where you examine early discovery calls for reps, and they all kind of go the same way. You log on, you do some small talk, and then reps ask questions for about 10 minutes. They say, great, check off, we've done discovery. Then they go into their demo or their slide deck for the next 30 minutes. And then at the end, they ask any questions, here are next steps. And obviously, there's so many problems with this, but the main problem is we think of discovery as something you do at the start of your first call, and once it's done, you can check the box and feel good about it. And in reality, we need to see a constant back and forth questions and answers and deeper level questions, and that conversation that continues throughout every call, whether it's a first call, whether we're down to negotiations, still needs to be discovery.
I love your perspective on that, and I share it 100%, that discovery starts with the first conversation and it goes all the way through, and it's two-way. Much of our industry looks at discovery as the set of questions that help us to scope the proposal, and that is not what good discovery is about. That's the Spanish Inquisition. Good discovery is a series of facilitated conversations, from my perspective, that help the customer identify different ways of achieving their results. For me, that's what discovery is about. It's a series of questions that take them through a consideration process that, again, as you say, isn't product related. It's business and outcome focused. That gets them to say at some level, gee, if we were able to accomplish this, then our business results would be different and better. I had a discovery conversation that took 8 minutes with the head of operations at Southwest Airlines. He explained to me and the team that as head of operations, he was getting results batched from yesterday. He knew exactly what happened yesterday. Didn't have any visibility on what was going on today. So he was making decisions based on history. And so I said, so what happens if Billy Bob is at Houston Hobby and his bags aren't coming out? And he goes, I don't know. And I said, so Billy Bob sends a tweet at Southwest Airlines saying, you stink, right? He's waiting for his bags. They're not coming out. You stink. Where's that tweet go? This was a while ago, so it was still a tweet. He says, well, that would go to marketing. It would be sentiment analysis. And in 6 months, we'd have a different view of what's going on at Houston Hobby. I said, that tweet is a signal that there's something going on right now in your operations. What if you were able to capture that tweet and identify an operational challenge in real time? And he said, can you do that? I said, yes. And he said, I'll take 2. That was it. That was it. And for those of you following along, that's streaming analytics, right? Really simple. Capture inputs from places that you wouldn't normally capture input and put it on a dashboard. Use some alarms. Did I mention streaming analytics? Did I mention online databases or data warehouses? Nope. He didn't care. He didn't care how it was done.
I love it too, because if you had led with that, it would never have resulted in the same outcome, right?
Right.
When we lead with features, when we lead with functionality, people immediately get their guard up and they don't want to tell you about their business. They don't want to tell you about their problems.
And this was also a conversation around the art of the possible. He didn't know that real-time notification was fairly straightforward. Wasn't something that was important to him until he realized it was possible and fairly easy, right? Because normally you'd think, well, I have to build in infrastructure and alarms. In the same way that years ago I saw the state of California putting out a bid for a provider to replace all the sensors in the 101 and 405 highways so they could keep track of traffic. It's like, wait a minute, Waze has all that information. You don't need to put physical infrastructure in. The cellular providers know exactly what's going on, and Waze knows you can buy that data without putting any infrastructure, replacing any infrastructure. And so it takes discovery for people who are aware of different ways of doing things to help customers think about their business differently, I guess is the way to say it. And for me, that's what discovery is all about. And Gerhard Geschwanter uses the phrase co-creation. It's co-creating a new set of possibilities with a customer that if I hadn't heard this gentleman talk about his challenges, I wouldn't have created that talk track. Once he explained what he was doing, that talk track came right to me. And I'm a natural storyteller. We want to enable our salespeople with the mindset to have those two-way discovery conversations.
Definitely. And I think we get an interesting pushback lately, and you might see this too, that a lot of times salespeople are now talking to the developer, they're talking to the CTO or CIO, and they feel like I can't ask those same questions. I can't lead that same conversation. This is a very technical person. They don't want to talk about the business. And it's all about kind of reframing that mindset. Everyone wants to talk about what they do. Everyone is happy to talk about how to make their lives easier. But we have to identify, like, what is it that's not working today? What are their personal motivations or professional motivations to fix that? And finding creative ways to get that in, to build that trust, to show them that, like, you're not a seller that knows nothing. You came doing your research. You understand their role. You understand their company. You're here to help them is, I think, a powerful lesson for anyone in life to figure out how can I help someone, even if it's not their natural inclination to open up and talk about their issues or be forthright. There's still a way, right, to break into that, to do effective discovery, to lead a good conversation that then potentially sets that person even up to be a coach or champion with time, or to bring in someone from the business that understands those pain points better and can help be a part of the evaluation.
So, Jackie, let's talk about how AI is changing everything, right? Today, if you read the industry writings, you'd think all I need to do is to get a $20 a month subscription to ChatGPT and buy a couple of other tools, and now I'm going to be super rep. In fact, I don't even need to I can set a query going, I can set a stream of outbound messages going, and I can go play golf or badminton or go to the beach or whatever I want. And when I come home at the end of the day or back to the office at the end of the day, my pipeline is going to be full. What do you think?
I think what we're seeing is that everyone is getting so many automated messages and calls and LinkedIn requests and outreach that prospects are so unlikely now to pick up the phone, to answer that message, to answer that email, that reps need to become even more differentiated. And when we use ChatGPT, we sound like everyone else. When we use AI tools kind of shortcut, it's great from a productivity standpoint, but from an effectiveness standpoint, we still need that human touch. I feel like right now, the way to really get through to someone is having well-researched messages, whether that's a phone call, whether that's an email, something very hyper-personalized that you can't just do through ChatGPT. ChatGPT can help in that process, but it can't do it in a way that's as personalized, as effective as a human. With gifts, it's with these touch points that really show someone that you've taken the time, that you didn't just set an automation and walk away, and people feel more compelled not only to answer, but to give you the time. So that's from like an outbound perspective, reaching out to someone. The personal touch now is more important than ever with the rise of AI. See it even on LinkedIn. You can always tell now when someone's post is just written by ChatGPT. It's not original. It's not interesting. It sounds a bit robotic. When someone writes it themselves, or at least edits ChatGPT to put in their own tone to make more personal, more vulnerable, you see the impact, you see the engagement So right now, I think reps really need to lean into what can they do assisted by AI to still have that personalized, well-researched touch, because it's more important than ever. And then I think throughout the sales process, of course, there are things we should be doing to help automate and make reps' lives easier. They shouldn't have to spend hours digging through financial data on a customer and LinkedIn posts and Google News. All of that should be handed to them ideally or available in Salesforce and made easier for them. But then it's taking all of that knowledge, all of that information, and for them, kind of going back to what you're saying in the beginning, for them to be the account executive, for them to be the professional that takes all of this, comes up with that perspective, that hypothesis, and uses it at their outreach, their conversations, and to really run their book of business just like a CEO would, and to bring in those people that can help them, like their sales engineer and SDR along the way.
Right. I think you've hit on a key point there, that it can be very efficient to pull all of that source information together. That information doesn't become knowledge, usable knowledge, until the rep internalizes it. And the worst case scenario is I get into an elevator going up to see the VP of marketing and the CEO walks in. If I've only focused on prepping for the conversation with the head of marketing, I don't have anything to say to the CEO. If I've internalized the story about the account, about the customer and what they're up to strategically, I can pivot and say, I hear you're doing interesting things in these new markets. I have some thoughts on how you might be able to improve your results. Without that internalization, you're digging for your script, and your script won't help you.
100%, which is why not everything can be automated. You still need to take the time to absorb it, to internalize it, to learn it for yourself, to practice and role play, like we talked about. It's so important.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's so much to learn from the world of sports. I was listening to the Sports Gene, the book called The Sports Gene, and a phrase popped out: deliberate practice. You get good at something by deliberate practice. You can't learn to ride a bicycle by watching a YouTube video. You can't learn to ride a bicycle by reading about it in a book. You have to put your butt on the saddle and try it and fall off and try it and fall off. And then all of a sudden, boom, this is what balance feels like. Same thing with the art of the pivot. You're going to get slapped down a half dozen times, and then you're going to pivot and you'll get rewarded, right? Because prospects reward good behavior. And how do they reward good behavior? With more time and access. And so that deliberate practice, I think I had Jonathan Mahan on, about 20 episodes ago, and he runs a training organization that isn't a training organization. It's a deliberate practice organization. And it's all about helping reps build that muscle memory.
Definitely. So many people are afraid to pick up the phone now, to call 100 times a day, but that's what it takes. Have to fall on your face a few times to feel confident in your pitch, in your delivery, in that discovery, in positioning the next step. And it all comes back to the practice, and good enablement helps to create that environment where practice is part of the culture and practice is the reinforcement for all learning.
Jackie, there's so much more we could talk about. We've only scratched the surface on enablement. You've been doing it for a long time. I've been doing it for a long time. Enablement's been around for a long, long time. And the tactics and the details have been changing pretty quickly. And the essence of it hasn't changed one bit. The first example of enablement I ever found was from Phil Patterson at National Cash Register in the 1870s. He wrote the National Cash Register Primer. And he talks about the salesperson walking the shop owner through the checkout process, not about the cash register, but about the checkout process and reducing shrink. In fact, is what the cash registers were designed to do. That's no different than what we want to accomplish today, of having the salesperson talk about the business process and the business results as opposed to the thing on the counter. And so from that perspective, 150 years later, it's still the same set of goals, and the techniques and the tools have improved a little bit.
Definitely. And it's exciting to be a part of the change too.
Yeah. So a couple of takeaways. You had 3 words: consistency, repeatability, and predictability. So I think that's one theme. And a second theme that we talked about is being able to correlate results with effort, right? What are we doing in enablement? What are the results we're getting in turn? Jackie, where can people find you?
They can find EnableWorks on LinkedIn or at enableworks.io. Or you can find me, Jackie Retig, also LinkedIn, or feel free to email our team at team@enableworks.io.
Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Lee. This has been great.
It's been fabulous. It's always great to talk with others who are also passionate about enablement.
I couldn't agree more.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Lee. Speak soon.